get started with tonight's speakers, John and Nancy Frates are high school sweethearts and both graduated from Boston College in 1980. Give it up for that, guys. They have been married for 34 years and raised their family in Beverly, Massachusetts. They have 3 children, Jennifer, Pete, and Andrew, and 3 grandchildren. Their lives changed when their son Pete was diagnosed with ALS when he was 27 years old. Pete has battled this disease with the help of his family and friends and the co-founder of the Ice Bucket Challenge, raising awareness, worldwide engagement, and over $250 million to fight ALS.
When Pete, who is now 32 years old, was first diagnosed with ALS, the Frates family made it a promise to keep him in the home no matter what. Nancy and John Frates are all about faith and love and pure agape. We are so honored during the Advent season to have them share their journey and their faith with us tonight. So please give them a big round of applause.
Okay, go ahead, you go first.
Well, thanks everybody. I'm John Frates, Nancy Frates, and our personal family priest, Father Bill Schmidt, who just showed up there. So he might have a few words to say as well, because he has a special spiritual journey that he took with our son Pete when he was playing overseas together. Having said all that, thank you so much for having us, and these are our 3 greatest loves. It's our family, Pete, our son, of course. It's our love of Boston College, and faith. So they all come and combine tonight. But it started way back, and you guys hit on it real quick. On the high school, I had decided to go with my best friend to UMass, and we already put our deposit down, and be roommates. Well, I started going hot and heavy with my friend over here. And we, I was the busboy, she was the waitress, and since she was the valedictorian, way off the charts, she got in early decision. Well, I got that thin envelope, the one, it wasn't as bad, but it's the wait list, and now we're into May, June, and things are starting to happen, and I think I want to go to Boston College. Well, what am I going to do? I have to call the uncle, the priest. So my uncle, the priest, happened to be best friends with the guys, the priests who ran St. John's Seminary. Next thing you know, I'm in. So it worked out. We deepened our relationship, our faith, and we started our family. But Nancy lived on Upper Campus. I lived over on Keys North in a basement that used to be a janitor's room, and it was made about a week before we were about to move in. So my friends and I that we're still close with and we vacation with all the time, we're really from the island of misfit toys. So that's how we all got together. I just want to correct the record real quick. We just had our 4th grandchild, a little boy, so his name is Jack. So anyway, the ice bucket was mentioned really quickly, and I thought I could turn it over to Nancy because the metrics and the measurables are so amazing, outstanding, but really the word has to be miraculous when you hear these numbers. And that's where I think we're going to kind of focus our story on tonight. So, Nance, maybe you could share a little bit about the ice bucket and the numbers.
Sure. So I have a new favorite T-shirt. I'm thinking this is my new favorite T-shirt. And we are beyond honored to be here. BC, as John said, plays such a role in our lives every single day, because it was here that we learned not only about ourselves and became what you see now with 3 kids and 4 grandchildren, but where we learned the true meaning of friendship. We graduated in 1980. Did anybody else's parents graduate in 1980? You graduated in 80? Oh, there you go. And I know over here, so Megan's father was John's roommate, so we know that, and Jack's father, John, was a good friend of ours. Your parent? He did. Great. So we have a really close class that has sustained all these years. And when our world changed in March of 2012, honestly, it was our classmates from BC that were the first ones by our side. I'm going to tell you a little story about that infamous day of Pete's diagnosis, because a lot's been written about Pete the athlete and the leader that he was, and there was nobody that was more rah-rah about Boston College than Pete Frates. Let me tell you, he used to wear, I used to have him in all BC gear when he was a little kid, and he just wore it with so much pride. The day he came to school here was the epitome of his world. He just loved every minute. So Pete gets diagnosed at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. The night before, he told us, we knew there was something wrong with him because he had hurt his hand playing ball. And the night before, he told us that we were going to go to the doctors the next day and they were going to tell us that he had a pinched nerve. And we always say that was the last gift Pete gave to us before he was diagnosed with this disease, because we went to bed and had a good night's sleep, and that was 6 years ago. That day, when the doctor delivered the diagnosis, Pete sat there, and it was like someone had told him the end of a movie that he had already seen. He kind of knew it. 6 months prior to March of 2012, in August of 2011, we were on a vacation down in Florida. And Pete, who had graduated BC, had gone over to Europe to play baseball, came home from Europe after a year, got a job, moved to South Boston. How many people are looking in South Boston for an apartment? Moved to South Boston, had a girlfriend who was at BC, and told me in August of 2011 that he was going to quit his job. And I remember saying to him, Pete, what are you thinking? You got rent, you got a girlfriend, you got car payments. And he said, Mom, I'm supposed to be doing something else. I'm not passionate about the work that I'm doing in the corporate world. I need to be passionate about what I'm doing, and I've got to go find what I'm supposed to be doing. And 6 months later, when that doctor said, Pete, you have ALS, Pete sat there with such confidence that he knew, now I know what I'm supposed to do. So 6 hours later, we were all very traumatized. And my daughter, who had graduated here in 2004, was living in Manhattan. She had been there for 8 years, and she came home with her husband, who's a Penn State guy, but we won't talk about that. And then Pete came to BC and picked up his girlfriend, Julie, at the time. And my younger son, Andrew, had just graduated Bentley, left his job and came home. And we were sitting around the table, and we were making small talk. Now, I'm going to tell you this story really slowly, because this was my faith journey was crystallized during this next 5 days. We were telling stories about Pete, because we were all very traumatized and very nervous. So Pete, and he's going to love that I tell this story, let me tell you. So when Pete was a little boy, as most little boys do, they don't train very fast. So he was very busy hitting balls, kicking balls, throwing balls, that he wouldn't come in to use the potty. And John used to run around behind him saying, Pete, is someone knocking at your back door? Something knocking at your back door. And they'd be running around the backyard, and it became this enormous joke in our house. So here we are with all this trauma sitting around the table, and that story came up. And Julie said, oh yeah, he told me all about that. Now this is the second time we've met Julie. And can you imagine this poor girl, this diagnosis, and then now we're talking about people, not going to the bathroom and being trained. And she says, oh yeah, he told me how John used to run around the backyard with him, someone knocking at your back door. Is someone knocking at your door? And I'm like, this is beyond words. Anyways, after we went through that little exercise, Pete set the vision of what he wanted to accomplish. As any servant leader, he told us that it was an unacceptable situation, and that he told us basically 3 things. The first thing he told us was that it was an opportunity to change the world. He then told us that he was going to get Major League Baseball to recommit to ALS because Lou Gehrig was in 1939, and as of recently, they hadn't been outwardly connected with ALS, and he was going to reignite that. And the third thing he said was that he was going to get it in front of philanthropists such as Bill Gates. He said that 6 hours after he was diagnosed. Well, the next day, we were all in trauma, and we got to work. And we started creating Team Freight Train literally the next day. But I was still very heavily traumatized. And my daughter had told us the week before that we were expecting our first grandchild. And she had to go back to New York in order to have her doctor's appointment. And she said, Mom, why don't you come back to New York with us? So we head back to New York for the weekend. She was living in Brooklyn at the time. And I said, well, I have to go to Mass on Sunday. And she said, okay, well, there's a 12 o'clock Mass at this church. There's a 5 o'clock Mass at the church down the street. And there's a 9 o'clock p.m. Mass at this church in the next neighborhood, but I've never been there. So I said, well, 9 o'clock's too late for me, so don't worry about that. We'll go to the 12. Well, 12, of course, we're in Brooklyn. We're at brunch, so we missed 12 o'clock Mass. 5 o'clock comes along. We're watching basketball. It was March Madness. So we missed 5 o'clock, and I said, oh my God, I gotta stay up to go to this 9 o'clock Mass. So off we walk to the 9 o'clock Mass. We walk in this beautiful church in Brooklyn. And there was a little choir at the front of the church singing, and people were filling in the pews, and they were practicing. And then the priest comes to the back of the church, everybody rises, and the head of the choir turns to us and says, everybody turn to page Psalm 464, someone knocking at your door. Wow is right. I am a regular churchgoer. I have honestly never heard that hymn sung in Mass before. And I was so grateful that my daughter and my son-in-law were there because I had someone to verify that this was actually happening. And I took out my phone and I quickly took a picture of the psalm and I sent it to my friend over here, Father Bill. And I said, how many times have you sung this during Mass in all your years being a parish priest? What did you say? A handful, maybe?
I think I said none.
Yeah, I think you said none too. And I was it was at that moment that I didn't need my faith to be restored, but my faith just grew. Literally, I could feel it within my whole being just grow. God was telling me 5 days after my son was told he was going to die within 2 to 5 years and there's nothing that we could do, that he was with us. Now, 2 weeks later, my friend Father Bill where were you? In Chattanooga or something? You were somewhere. You went to a Catholic bookstore somewhere. So Father Bill writes to me 2 weeks later when he was on a trip that he went into the local Catholic bookstore, and being, the good Catholic that he is, he went straight to the clearance rack. And on the clearance rack were a bunch of statues of the psalm, someone knocking at your door. And he bought me the picture of Jesus knocking at the door. So as you can see, that was the beginning of what some people might term as an odyssey, but I term as a faith journey that we've been on for the past 6 years. Now, we don't have to go too far to continue to be reinforced in our faith, because what happened in August of 2014, as John said, was a miracle. I mean, how does Pete tell us that we had an opportunity to change the world? And we did. That Major League Baseball needs to recommit to this disease. And last week, we were guests of the Commissioner of Baseball at an ALS gala where he said, we are completely committed to the fight against ALS. And then everybody, out of the 17 million videos for the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge that's been posted, we're always asked, what's your favorite video? Well, our favorite video is Bill Gates. because check, check, check. Pete set the vision, and we continue to this day to accomplish these goals one at a time. Of course, the greatest one being finding a treatment and a cure.
So we were invited out to San Francisco, out to Facebook themselves. They flew us out there, which was wonderful. And they could not believe, because in their 14 years of existence, they showed us that when they took together all 13 prior years of the Ice Bucket Challenge, so those 13 years would be the two twin boys talking their own language at the refrigerator, the piano playing cat, anything you can imagine that was a viral sensation at the time, all 13 years combined didn't even come close to the August of 2014. And they just wanted to share with us this immense, incredible opportunity. And what they told us is amazing, because they said we were always worried about a hack. We were always worried about this platform that we invented being used for evil. We knew that's what was going to happen. Instead, it was used for good, to promote awareness, to promote a cause, to have $225 million be donated to ALS, an unfunded, unknown disease, in 6 weeks' time, and then they just stopped counting. So there were 2 or 3 servers that they buried out in the Midwest, they claimed, that they were always worried that if the system got overrun due to evil or a hack, that these circuit breakers would kick on. And sure enough, they kicked on because of the Ice Bucket. And on the news feed, they just kept running and running. So again, just an incredible, miraculous turn of events. And it started with somebody who is really unknown. Yeah, maybe on the BC field, he might be remembered around the 2007, but Pete, believe me, did not set the world on fire with his bat. He had 2 or 3 amazing games.
I hope he's watching,
yeah,
because he's going to love us after this.
But, you know, a 250 lifetime hitter, let's put it this way, Major League Baseball did not come calling for him.
Well, that time, they came again.
But, you know, we immediately started getting calls from all over the country about, you know, tell us about how you invented this, how you created this, and what, you know, does it mean? Your silly gesture, you know, pouring ice water over your head, you're wasting water on, you know, California here, and our environment is a drought. What are you doing? Why are you ruining our environment? And all this crazy stuff. You know, slacktivism kept coming up. I had to look it up. I didn't understand what it was, but apparently it's you can pose in a fake way doing something, but not really generate any productive mean to it. But you know what? $225 million in 6 weeks, I think it worked pretty well. But for me, you know, they kept saying, well, this signifies victory, right? That's what, when you win the Super Bowl, you dump it over your head, a bucket of water. That's what you always see the coach doing. Yeah, I'd like to think that that's victory over ALS, victory over this dreaded disease. But I always went back to the roots of my faith, having 16 years in the bank. You don't have as much as I do. I went 8 years with the nuns, 4 years with the brothers, and then 4 years with the Jesuits. I'm damaged goods, but but anyway, no, what I meant is that to me it means salvation, right? Redemption. It's almost a baptism of sorts, and that's the way I see it. No one's ever asked us that one before. So every ALS seminar, we go for therapy sessions just to try and understand this devastating journey, as Nancy said and the doctors said we were about to embark on. So they gave us a 2-year to 5-year time frame. 2 years if you did nothing, no intervention, which meant no feeding tubes, no ventilation to breathe. If not, it would be 5 years. And Pete, as you know, has been hospitalized many times, but it's been 5.5 years, so he's playing extra innings, which is amazing. But they called it a journey, and I hated the word journey, you know, because to me it meant a defined beginning, a defined end. We rented a car once on a baseball trip called a Journey. The thing sucked, so I hated that car. And the band Journey, when we were in college back in the day, they were horrible. But now all of a sudden, because of, you know.
I liked them, but that's okay.
But, you know, but that's exactly what this is. This is a journey. It's a journey of our faith. It's a journey of relationships. It's a journey in seeing good in so many people. So coming back to that question, every older person, because only 3% of the population is under 30 years old, as Pete was, is diagnosed with ALS. All these older folks who were diagnosed were stuck in, how did this happen to me? Why? I worked on a ship one time and I touched an asbestos pipe. That must have happened, right? Well, we never really questioned why or how it happened to us. We just wanted to know how to live with this. And that's, I think, was Pete's mantra. So what can you draw on, right? We're a sports family, and we can look at amazing miracles that occur on all playing surfaces. In fact, our good friend Doug Flutie had a miracle back in 1984,
while I was
right?
carrying
Yeah,
Pete.
that's right. One of the greatest things, but that's a fleeting moment in time. Music or lyrics in a song, it might really connect to how you're feeling or the emotion that you have at that one particular time. A book or a movie you can dive a little deeper into. Even politics, you can latch on to a particular platform that somebody's trying to push, and you might identify with that platform, but it's not all inclusive. The only real platform that you can bond to, that you can really put some sort of concrete foundation, whatever the right word is your faith. This is how you live your life. And I don't wish this diagnosis on anyone, certainly not on us. We wish this would pass from us, but the only reason we can get through this is really our faith. It's everything that we learned.
So to kind of dovetail on what John said about, I loved all those things that you just talked about.
Wow.
But one
That's a first.
I know, shocking, as he used to cheat off my papers, but no, you didn't hear that. We actually got caught, but that's a whole nother story. So one thing that Pete has given us so many gifts. This journey has been a gift in a lot of ways. I wouldn't, like John said, we wouldn't wish it on anyone. But the blessings that have been bestowed on us through this journey are things that we would never see. I remember I was in a supermarket one day, and this woman was coming the other way, and she had a cane across her carriage. And we were crossing each other, and her cane dropped. Now, anybody with any common decency would stop and pick up the woman's cane and give it to her like I did. That wasn't the extraordinary part of it. The extraordinary part that lived with me was when she looked at me and said, "Thank you." Her eyes just pierced right through me, and her smile was so beautiful. And I thought to myself, if I wasn't living this life of being in the present, I would have still picked that cane up. But I would have given it to her and would have grabbed my Cheetos and kept going, right? But I took a moment to just be with her in that moment. And I think that's something that's very profound here, is Pete, because of his circumstance, because of his faith, because of his spirituality, lives very much in the present. We all get caught up on the exam you have tomorrow, or the paper that's due next week, or your friend that you have to go see this weekend. But if you live in the present and you look at the blessings that surround you, like right now, I feel the blessings of being right here with every single person who's in this room. If you live in the present, it's amazing the things that you will see. One of the things that you're going to see is just the good in people. The other thing you're going to see is that every single person has a story. And you don't need to know the story, but you can look in someone's eyes and you can relate to them. That's the biggest gift we can have as humans, is just relating to someone else. The other thing about being in the present is opportunity won't pass you by. Now, the night that Pete was diagnosed, when he said, "What an opportunity we've been given to change the world," I have to tell you, I thought to myself, Pete, there are a lot of words I would use for this diagnosis. Opportunity wasn't one of them. But that's how he looked at it. He looked at it as an opportunity to help others. And that's what we've done. Now, the Ice Bucket Challenge, interesting thing about the Ice Bucket Challenge is that the Ice Bucket Challenge had been on the internet for 8 months prior to August 2014 for all different causes. I think every kind of cancer had done the Ice Bucket Challenge. Someone had done it. Why? Why did it catch on with ALS? Well, I'll tell you why. I've thought about it enough, so I get it. Number one, Pat Quinn, who Pete was mentoring in New York, saw it. When he saw it, he said, living in the present, here's opportunity for us. And then he said, I've got to get this to Pete right away, because he knew the power of Pete's network. Called Pete. Pete put all his different circles into motion, BC being the biggest one of all. But then we got strategic and we got purposeful. But it just amazes me that all these other diseases had and it's so funny because all those other diseases have called us and asked us how we did it. And I kept saying, go online. I'm sure that someone poured an ice water over their head for your disease at some point during those 8 months. We got strategic, we got purposeful, but we called on friendships and we asked people to do something for those that couldn't do it for themselves. I also believe in my soul that it was our time. I think the universe had aligned. I think that this had been underfunded, unheard of, and not included for a long time. And it took, now if you think about the stat John said, in the world of ALS, the average age is 55. Only 3% are under the age of 30, and they only live for 2 to 5 years. How are there 7 young men under the age of 30 who are all diagnosed at the same time and all committed to moving the needle on this disease and all started communicating with each other? There was, it's, to me, it's spirit, it's God. To other people, it's the universe, right? Energy, they think it is. I'll tell you another story. During 2014, Julie and Pete got married in 2013. Julie graduated BC in 2012. Her and Pete got married on June 1st, 2013. And in January of 2014, Julie found out she was expecting, and she was due the middle of September of 2014. So of course, August 1st, 2014 comes along, and people start pouring ice water over their heads, and our whole world is completely changed upside down. And then we started getting all these media calling us that they had to come. And it's funny, our first thought was, the phone, let the phone go to our voicemail, because so many people were coming at us and wanted to interview us. And then we really sat down and we looked at each other, again, being very present, and said, this is our time. We can't miss a phone call. We can't miss an interview, because we knew we had to keep the momentum going. So every interview. But Pete, unfortunately at the time, was already in a wheelchair, already on a feeding tube and totally immobile. And Julie was expecting, she was almost 9 months pregnant. So all the media had to come to our house. And we live on a cul-de-sac. So CBS News would come in, they would set up, they would do the interview, they'd go back out, get in their truck, they would go out, NBC would come in. Then the next one, Entertainment Tonight, we had them all, let me tell you. All coming to Little Beverly, Massachusetts. It was so funny because at one point our neighbor next door came over with a bunch of pizzas and threw them on our floor saying, you guys need food in there, and just kept because they couldn't believe what they were seeing. So we're in the media, we're in the middle of this viral storm. Of course, we were on the internet continuing the momentum. We were being so guided at the time to keep the momentum going, to go to key influencers, to all those tricks that we all know on social media now. Back in 2014, we were doing it and not really knowing what we were doing, but it obviously worked. Well, as we're going through this month of August, August 30th comes along, And all of a sudden, the nurse that takes care of Pete comes in and she says, yeah, we're heading to the car. I said, what do you mean we're heading to the car? She said, Julie's in labor. I'm like, what? Julie, she's not due for 2 more weeks. She can't be in labor. Well, off we all go to Mass General. And my granddaughter, Pete's daughter, was born 2 weeks early on August 31st, 2014. Now, she is an angel. She is a miracle. She is a blessing. And she will grow, maybe without her father here in this world with her. But every time someone talks about the miraculous month of August 2014, she's going to know that she's the exclamation point of that month, coming 2 weeks early. So another part of the story is Julie and Pete didn't find out if they were having a girl or a boy, and they told us if it's a girl, we're going to name her Reese. And so I go bombing in, and it's a girl, and oh, little Reese, she's so cute. And Julie goes, put a hold on to that. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, Pete has some other ideas. So next thing I know, Pete comes rolling around in his wheelchair, and the nurses had taken a towel and wrote Lucy Fitzgerald Frates on it. That he had seen the name Lucy a couple of weeks before and said, I like the name Lucy. And Julie said, well, Reese, the girls will get this. The guys, this is going straight over their head. Reese and Lucy, you know, those are going to be 2 different personalities. Let's see what she's like when she's born. And she was a Lucy, let me tell you. So she comes home, and we're all doting all over Lucy, and I have an interview. And being interviewed by one of the television shows, and the reporter looks right at me and says, Mrs. Frates, so Lucy. And I said, yeah. I said, beautiful little Lou. And he looks right at me and he says, so he named her after Lou Gehrig. And I looked right at him and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna kill him. He didn't even tell me that. And I said, that is unbelievable, because we were calling her Lou. I'm like, he named her after Lou Gehrig. Wow. So I go home, and Pete, you know, at the time was lying in bed, and Julie was in there, and I walk in and I'm like, oh, Pete. And I looked at Julie. I said, did you know he did this? And she looked at me like, she's lost it. And I said, you named her after Lou Gehrig. And he looks right at me. The exact same reaction I had. He went like this. Like literally looked at me. He consciously never even thought of it. Then, a couple of weeks later, I'm watching The Theory of Everything, and Stephen Hawking has 3 children. He had 1 daughter. Her name is Lucy. Then the next week, one of my very close friends from BC sent us a poster of St. Lucy, St. Lucia, St. Lucy, who is the patron saint of vision, of the eyes, of light, but of the eyes. And that's how Pete communicates, is with his eyes. So this journey, the affirmation that we get all the time is remarkable. This book that has been written about us is in negotiation to be made into a movie, and I think it's being announced in January. But the screenwriters, they're out in La La Land out there, and they came to our house a couple of months ago to visit. And I had always talked to them about all these blessings and miracles that have been surrounding us as we're on this journey. And they came out and they looked right at us and they said, we really get that. We're calling it Pete's fairy dust. So we get called from them all the time because things happen that really, there are no coincidences in life. If you really deeply have that love of Jesus and that love that we're being guided, and that there is so much more to life than what we live right now. And so they call it Pete's fairy dust. But I'm going to leave you with what I want to say, and then I'll let John finish. The ALS Ice Bucket Challenge happened for a lot of reasons. There are a lot of things that people have talked about, have said, The numbers are staggering, everything about it. But the thing I want you to remember is this. First of all, people are really good. No one had to dump an ice over their head. No one had to look up ALS on Google and find out what it was. No one had to donate money to a cause that didn't even affect their family. But because people are so good that they did that. The second thing is value, nurture, and cultivate relationships. The people that are sitting with you at these tables, the people that you'll go back into your dorm with, your next door neighbors, the people that you meet at work. What goes around comes around is a cliche. You never know when you're going to call on those people again. Value all the people in life. That is something that Pete did at such a high level. Every person he ever met became like one of his best friends. I think they were laughing at his wedding that he could have had like 100 best men given, because they were all his best friend. And he just had an unbelievable ability to, when he talked to you, you were the only person in the world. He gave you the time. He was present with you all the time. And know that everybody has a story. If you had met us earlier tonight, you wouldn't know what we were living with. It's because we continue to live in positivity. If you're having a bad day, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and be positive in the day for those that are around you. And the more you exude positivity and kindness, the more that will come back to you.
Okay, we're just going to wrap up now and maybe have some Q&A. But the one thing that I was privileged enough when I traveled with BC for 3 years, and Pete was very active, he would always give a talk. And one of the talks I remember before we took the field is he would gather the guys around and say this: guys, play this game not for yourself. Look to the left of you and to the right of you. Play to make that person, your teammate, successful. Then you in turn will be successful. Be passionate, be genuine, be hardworking, and never be afraid to be great. So thank you very much for having us out tonight. All right.